Alright, so it all started a long time ago. 10 or 15 billion years ago. I began a few minutes later. I'm not current on which theory is in the lead, the steady state or the Big Bang, but in either case, the universe began a long time ago. At that point, I opened my eyes and gave Ishmael a speculative look. He gave me one back and said, "Is that it? Is that the story?" "No, I was just checking." I closed my eyes and began again. And then, I don't know, I guess about 6 or 7 billion years ago, our solar system was born. I have a picture in my mind from some childhood encyclopedia of blobs being thrown out or blobs coalescing, and these were the planets, which, over the next couple of billion years, cooled and solidified. Well, let's see. Life appeared in the chemical broth of our ancient oceans about, what, 5 billion years ago? Three and a half or four. Okay. Bacteria, microorganisms evolved into higher forms, more complex forms, which evolved into still more complex forms. Life gradually spread to the land. I don't know. Slimes at the edge of the oceans, amphibians. The amphibians moved inland, evolved into reptiles. The reptiles evolved into mammals. This was what, a billion years ago? Only about a quarter of a billion years ago. Okay, anyway, the mammals, I don't know, small critters and small niches under bushes in the trees. From the critters in the trees came the primates. Then, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 million years ago, one branch of the primates left the trees and I ran out of steam. "This isn't a test," Ishmael said. "The broad outlines will do, just the story as it's generally known, as it's known by bus drivers and ranch hands and senators." "Okay," I said, and closed my eyes again. Well, one thing led to another. Species followed species, and finally, man appeared. That was that. 3 million years ago? Three seems pretty safe. Okay, is that it? That's it, and the outline. The story of creation as told in your culture. That's right, to the best of our present knowledge. Ishmael nodded and told me to turn off the tape recorder. Then he sat back with a sigh that rumbled through the glass like a distant volcano, folded his hands over his central paunch, and gave me a long, inscrutable look. "And you, an intelligent and moderately well-educated person, would have me believe that this isn't a myth? What's mythical about it?" I didn't say there was anything mythical about it. I said it was a myth. I think I laughed nervously. "Maybe I don't know what you mean by a myth." "I don't mean anything you don't mean. I'm using the word in the ordinary sense." "Then it's not a myth." "Certainly it's a myth. Listen to it." Ishmael told me to rewind the tape and play it back. After listening to it, I sat there looking thoughtfully for a minute or two, for the sake of appearances. Then I said, "It's not a myth. You could put that in an 8th grade science text, and I don't think that there's any school board anywhere that will quibble with it, leaving aside the creationists." "I agree wholeheartedly. Haven't I said that the story is ambient in your culture? Children assemble it from many media, including science books." "Then what are you saying? Are you trying to tell me that it isn't a factual account?" "It's full of facts, of course, but their arrangement is purely mythical." "I don't know what you're talking about." "You've obviously turned off your mind. Mother Culture has crooned you to sleep." I gave him a hard look. "Are you saying that evolution is a myth?" "No." "Are you saying that man did not evolve?" "No." Then what is it? Ishmael looked at me with a smile. Then he shrugged his shoulders, then he raised his eyebrows. I stared at him and thought, I'm being teased by a gorilla. It didn't help. Play it again, he told me. When it was over, I said, okay, I heard one thing. The word appeared. I said that finally man appeared. Is that it? No, it's nothing like that. I'm not quibbling over a word. It was clear from the context that the word appeared was just a synonym for evolved. Then what the hell is it? You're really not thinking, I'm afraid. You've recited a story you've heard many 1,000 times, and now you're listening to Mother Culture as she murmurs in your ear. There, my child. There's nothing to think about, nothing to worry about. Don't get excited, don't listen to the nasty animal. This is no myth. Nothing I tell you is a myth, so there's nothing to think about, nothing to worry about. Just listen to my voice and go to sleep. Go to sleep, go to sleep. I chewed on my lip for a while. Then I said, that did not help. All right, he said. I'll tell you a story of my own, and maybe that'll help. He nibbled for a moment on a leafy wand, closed his eyes, and began. This story, Ishmael said, takes place 500 million years ago, an inconceivably long time ago, when this planet was all but unrecognizable to you. Nothing at all stirred in the land except the wind and the dust. Not a single blade of grass waved in the wind, not a single cricket chirped, not a single bird soared in the sky. All these things were tens of millions of years ago. All these things were tens of millions of years in the future. Even the seas were eerily still and silent, for the vertebrates too were tens of millions of years away in the future. But of course, there was an anthropologist on land. What sort of world would it be without an anthropologist? He was, however, a very depressed and disillusioned anthropologist, for he'd been everywhere on the planet looking for someone to interview. And every tape in his knapsack was as blank as the sky. But one day, as he was moping alongside the ocean, he saw what seemed to be a living creature in the shallows of offshore. It was nothing to brag about, just a sort of squishy blob, but it was the only prospect he'd seen in all his journeys. So he waded out to where it was, bobbing in the waves. He greeted the creature politely, and was greeted in kind, and soon the two of them were good friends. The anthropologist explained as well as he could that he was a student of lifestyles and customs, and begged his new friend for information of this sort, which was readily forthcoming. And now, he said at last, I'd like to get on tape, in your own words, some of the stories you tell among yourselves. Stories? The other asked. You know, like your creation myth, if you have one. What is a creation myth? The creature asked. Oh, you know, the anthropologist replied. The fanciful tale you tell your children about the origins of the world. Well, at this, the creature drew itself up indignantly. At least, as well as a squishy blob can do, and replied that his people had no such fanciful tale. You have no creation, then? You have no account of your creation? Certainly we have an account of creation, the other snapped. But it's definitely not a myth. Oh, certainly not, the anthropologist said, remembering his training at last. I'll be terribly grateful if you share it with me. Very well, the creature said, but I want you to understand that, like you, we are a strictly rational people. We accept nothing that is not based on observation, logic, and the scientific method. Of course, the anthropologist agreed. So at last the creature began its story. The universe, it said, was born a long, long time ago, perhaps 10 or 15 billion years ago. Our own solar system, this star, this planet, and all the others, seem to have come into being some 2 or 3 billion years ago. For a long time, nothing whatever lived here. But then, after 1 billion years ago, life appeared. Excuse me, the anthropologist said. You say that life appeared. Where did that happen, according to your myth, I mean? According to your scientific account. The creature seemed baffled by the question and turned a pale lavender. Do you mean in what precise spot? No, I mean, did this happen on land or in the sea? Land, the other asked. What is land? Oh, you know, he said, waving toward the shore. The expanse of dirt and rocks that begin over there. The creature turned a deeper shade of lavender and said, I can't imagine what you're gibbering about. The dirt and rocks over there are simply the lip of the vast bowl that holds the sea. Oh yes, the anthropologist said. I see what you mean. Quite. Go on. Very well, the other said. For millions of years, for millions of centuries, the life of the world was merely microorganisms floating helplessly in a chemical broth. But little by little, more complex forms appeared. Single-celled creatures, slimes, algae, polyps, and so on. But finally, the creature said, turning quite pink with pride as he came to the climax of his story. But finally, jellyfish appeared. Nothing much came out of me for 90 seconds or so, except maybe waves of baffled fury. Then I said, That's not fair. What do you mean? I don't exactly know what I mean. You've made some sort of point, but I don't know what it is. You don't? No, I don't. What did the jellyfish mean when it said, but finally, jellyfish appeared? It meant that is what it was all leading up to. This is what the whole 10 or 15 billion years of creation were leading up to. Jellyfish. I agree. Then why doesn't your account of creation end at the appearance of jellyfish? I suppose I tittered. Because there was more to come beyond jellyfish. That's right. Creation didn't end with jellyfish. Still to come were vertebrates, and the amphibians, and the reptiles, and the mammals, and of course, finally, man. Right? And so your account of creation ends, and finally, man appeared. Yes. Meaning what? Meaning that there was no more to come, meaning that creation had come to an end. That this is what it was all leading up to. Yes. Of course, everyone in your culture knows this. The pinnacle was reached in man. Man is the climax of the whole cosmic drama of creation. Yes. When man finally appeared, creation came to an end, because its objective had been reached. There was nothing left to create. That seems to be an unspoken assumption. It's certainly not always unspoken. The religions of your culture aren't reticent about it. Man is the end product of creation. Man is the creature for whom all the rest was made. This world, the solar system, this galaxy, the universe itself. True. Everyone in your culture knows that the world wasn't created for jellyfish, or salmon, or iguanas, or gorillas. It was created for man. That's right. Ishmael fixed me with a sardonic eye. And this is not mythology? Well, the facts are facts. Certainly, facts are facts, even when they're embodied in mythology. But what about the rest? Did the entire cosmic process of creation come to an end 3 million years ago, right here on this little planet with the appearance of man? No. Did even the planetary process of creation come to an end 3 million years ago with the appearance of man? Did evolution come to a screeching halt just because man had arrived? No, of course not. Then why did you tell it that way? I guess I told it that way because that's the way it's told. That's the way it's told among the takers. It's certainly not the only way it can be told. Okay, I see that now. How would you tell it? He nodded toward the world outside his window. Do you see the slightest evidence anywhere in the universe that creation came to an end with the birth of man? Do you see the slightest evidence anywhere out there that man was the climax toward which creation had been straining from the beginning? No, I can't even imagine what such evidence would look like. That should be obvious. If the astrophysicists could report that the fundamental creative processes of the universe came to a halt 5 billion years ago, when our solar system made its appearance, that would offer at least some support for these notions. Yes, I see what you mean. Or, if the biologists and paleontologists could report that speciation came to a halt 3 million years ago, this too would be suggestive. Yes. But you know that neither of these things happened, in fact. Very far from it. The universe went on as before, the planet went on as before. Man's appearance caused no more stir than the appearance of jellyfish. Very true. Ishmael gestured toward the tape recorder. So what are we to make of that story you told? I bared my teeth in a rueful grin. It's a myth. Incredibly enough, it's a myth. I told you yesterday that the story of the people of your culture are enacting is about the meaning of the world, about divine intentions in the world, and about human destiny. Yes. And according to this first part of the story, what is the meaning of the world? I thought about that for a moment. I don't quite see how it explains the meaning of the world. Along about the middle of your story, the focus of attention shifted from the universe at large to this one planet. Why? Because this one planet was destined to be the birthplace of man. Of course, as you tell it, the birth of man was a central event. Indeed, the central event in the history of the cosmos itself. From the birth of man on, the rest of the universe ceases to be of interest, ceases to participate in the unfolding drama. For this, the earth alone is sufficient. It is the birthplace and home of man, and that's its meaning. The takers regard the world as a sort of human life support system, as a machine designed to produce and sustain human life. Yes, that's so. In your telling of the story, you naturally left out any mention of the gods, because you didn't want it to be tainted with mythology. Since its mythological character is now established, you no longer have to worry about that. Supposing there is a divine agency behind creation, what can you tell me about the gods' intentions? Well, basically, what they had in mind when they started out was man. They made the universe so that our galaxy could be in it. They made the galaxy so that our solar system could be in it. They made our solar system so that our planet could be in it. And they made our planet so that we could be in it. The whole thing was made so that man would have a hunk of dirt to stand on. And this is generally how it's understood in your culture, at least by those who assume that the universe is an expression of divine intentions. Yes. Obviously, since the entire universe was made so that man could be made, man must be a creature of enormous importance to the gods. But this part of the story gives no hint of their intentions toward him. They must have some special destiny in mind for him, but that's not revealed here. True. Every story is based on a premise. It's the working out of a premise. As a writer, I'm sure you know that. Yes. You'll recognize this one. Two children of warring families fall in love. Right, Romeo and Juliet. The story being enacted in the world by the takers also has a premise, which is embodied in the part of the story you told me today. See if you can figure out what it is. I closed my eyes and pretended I was working hard, when in fact I knew I didn't stand a chance. I'm afraid I don't see it. The story of the Leavers have enacted in the world has an entirely different premise, and it would be impossible for you to discover it at this point. But you should be able to discover the premise of your own story. It's a very simple notion and the most powerful in all of human history. Not necessarily the most beneficial, but certainly the most powerful. Your entire history, with all its marvels and catastrophes, is a working out of this premise. Truthfully, I can't even imagine what you're getting at. Think. Look, the world wasn't made for jellyfish, was it? No. It wasn't made for frogs, or lizards, or rabbits. No. Of course not. The world was made for man. That's right. Everyone in your culture knows that, don't they? Even atheists who swear there is no God know that the world was made for man. Yes, I'd say so. Alright, that's the premise of your story. The world was made for man. I can't quite grasp it. I can't quite see why it's a premise. The people of your culture made it a premise, took it as a premise. They said, what if the world was made for us? Okay, keep going. Think of the consequences of taking that as your premise. If the world was made for you, then what? Okay, I see what you mean. I think if the world was made for us, then it belongs to us, and we can do what we damn well please with it. Exactly. That's what's been happening here for the past 10,000 years. You've been doing what you damn well please with the world. And of course you mean to go right on doing what you damn well please with it, because the whole damn thing belongs to you. Yes, I said, and thought for a second. Actually, that's pretty amazing. I mean, you hear this 50 times a day. People talk about our environment, our seas, our solar system. I've even heard people talk about our wildlife. And just yesterday, you assured me with complete confidence that there is nothing in your culture remotely resembling mythology. True, I did. Ishmael continued to stare at me morosely. I was wrong, I told him. What more do you want? Astonishment, he said. I nodded. I'm astonished, all right. I just don't let it show. I should have gotten you when you were 17. I shrugged, meaning I wish that he had. Yesterday, I told you that your story provides you with an explanation of how things came to be this way. Right. What contribution does this first part of the story make to that explanation? You mean, what contribution does it make to explaining how things came to be the way they are right now? That's right. Offhand, I don't see how it makes any contribution to it. Think. Would things have come to be this way if the world had been made for jellyfish? No, they wouldn't. Obviously not. If the world had been made for jellyfish, things would be different. That's right, but it wasn't made for jellyfish. It was made for man. And this partly explains how things came to be made this way. Right. It's a sort of sneaky way of blaming everything on the gods. If they made the world for jellyfish, then none of this would have happened. Exactly, Ishmael said. You're beginning to get the idea. Do you have a feeling now for where you might find the other parts of the story, the middle and the end? I gave this some thought. I'd watch Nova, I think. Why? I say that if Nova was doing the story of creation, the story I told today would be the outline. All I have to do now is figure out how they do the rest. Then that's your next assignment. Tomorrow I want to hear the middle of the story. Chapter 4. Okay, I said. I think I have the middle and the end of the story down pat. Ishmael nodded, and I started the tape recorder. What I did was start with the premise. The world was made for man. Then I asked myself how I would write the story as a treatment for Nova. It came out like this. The world was made for man, but it took him a long, long time to figure that out. For nearly 3 million years, he lived as though the world had been made for jellyfish. That is, he lived as though he were just like any other creature, as though he were a lion or a wombat. What exactly does it mean to live like a lion or a wombat? It means to live at the mercy of the world. It means to live without having any control over your environment. I see. Go on. Okay. In this condition, man could not be truly man. He couldn't develop a truly human way of life. A way of life that was distinctly man, or distinctly human. So during the early part of his life, actually the greater part of his life, man just fuzzled along, getting nowhere and doing nothing. As it happened, there was a key problem to be solved. And it was this, that took me a long time to work out. What the problem was, men could get nowhere living like a lion or a wombat, because if you're a lion or a wombat, in order to accomplish anything, man had to settle down in one place where he could get to work, so to speak. I mean, that it was impossible for him to get beyond a certain point living out in the open as a hunter-gatherer, always moving from place to place in search of food. To get beyond that point, he had to settle down, had to have a permanent base from which he could begin to master his environment. Okay, why not? I mean, well, what was stopping him from doing that? What was stopping him was the fact that if he settled down in one place for more than a few weeks, he'd starve. As a hunter-gatherer, he would simply clean the place out. There would be nothing left to hunt and gather. In order to achieve settlement, men had to learn one fundamental manipulation. He had to learn how to manipulate his environment so that this food exhaustion didn't occur. He had to manipulate it so that it produced more human food. In other words, he had to become an agriculturalist. This was the turning point. The world had been made for man, but he was unable to take possession of it until this problem was cracked. And he finally cracked it about 10,000 years ago, back there in the Fertile Crescent. This was a very big moment, the biggest in human history up to this point. Man was at last free of all those restraints that the limitations of the hunting-gathering life had kept man in check for 3 million years. But with agriculture, those limitations vanished, and his rise was mediocre. Settlement gave rise to division of labor gave rise to technology. With the rise of technology came trade and commerce. With trade and commerce came mathematics and literacy and science and all the rest. The whole thing was underway at last, and the rest, as they say, it's history. And that's the middle of the story. Very impressive, Ishmael said. I'm sure you realize that the big moment you've just described was in fact the birth of your culture. Yes. It should be pointed out, however, that the notion that agriculture spread across the world from a single point of origin is distinctly old hat. Nevertheless, the Fertile Crescent remains the legendary birthplace of agriculture, at least in the West, and this has a special importance that we'll look on later. Okay. Yesterday's part of the story revealed the meaning of the world as it's understood among the takers. The world is a human life support system, a machine designed to produce and sustain human life. Right. Today's part of the story seems to be about the destiny of man. Obviously, it was not man's destiny to live like a lion or a wombat. That's right. What is destiny? What is man's destiny then? I said. Well, man's destiny is to achieve, to accomplish great things. As it's known among the takers, man's destiny is more specific than that. Well, I suppose you could say that his destiny is to build civilization. Think mythologically. I'm afraid I don't know how that's done. I'll demonstrate then. Listen. I listened. As we saw yesterday, creation wasn't complete when jellyfish appeared, or when amphibians appeared, or when reptiles appeared, or even when mammals appeared. According to your mythology, it was complete only when man appeared. Right. Why was the world and the universe incomplete without man? Why did the world and the universe need man? I don't know. Well, think about it. Think about the world without man. Imagine a world without man. Okay, I said and closed my eyes. A couple of minutes later, I told him I was imagining the world without man. What's it like? I don't know. It's just the world. Where are you? What do you mean? Where are you looking at it from? Oh, from above, from outer space. What are you doing up there? I don't know. Why aren't you down on the surface? I don't know. Without man on it, I'm just a visitor, an alien. Well, go on down to the surface. Okay, I said, but after a minute I went on to say, that's interesting. I'd rather not go down there. Why? What's down there? I laughed. The jungle is down there. I see. You mean nature, red in tooth and claw, dragons of the prime that tear each other in their slime. That's it. And what would happen if you did go down there? I'd be one of the ones the dragons were tearing in their slime. I opened my eyes in time to see Ishmael nodding, and it is at this point that we begin to see where man fits into the divine scheme. The gods didn't mean to leave the world a jungle, did they? You mean in our mythology? Certainly not. So, without man, the world was unfinished, was just nature, red in tooth and claw. It was in chaos, in a state of primeval anarchy. That's right, that's it exactly. So it needed what? It needed someone to come in and straighten it out, someone to put it in order. And what sort of person is it who straightens things out? What sort of person takes anarchy in hand and puts it in order? Well, a ruler, a king. Of course, the world needed a ruler. It needed man. Yes. So now we have a clear idea what the story is all about. The world was made for man, and man was made to rule it. Yes, that's very obvious now. Everyone understands that. And this is what? What? Is this fact? No. Then what is it? It's mythology, I said, of which no trace is to be found in your culture. That's right. Once again, Ishmael stared at me glumly through the glass. Look, I said after a bit. The things you're showing me, these things you're doing, they are almost beyond belief. I know that, but it's just not in me to leap up out of my chair while striking my brow and crying, "My God, this is incredible." He wrinkled his forehead thoughtfully for a moment before saying, "What's wrong with you then?" He seemed so genuinely concerned that I had to smile. "All frozen inside," I told him, "an iceberg." He shook his head for me. "Sorry." To return to our subject, as you say, it took man a long, long time to to tumble to the fact that he was meant for greater things than he could achieve living like a lion or a wombat. For some 3 million years, he was just part of the anarchy, was just one more creature rolling around in the slime. Right. It was only about 10,000 years ago that he finally realized that his place was not in the slime. He had to lift himself out of the slime and take his place in hand and straighten it out. Right. But the world didn't meekly submit to the man's rule, did it? No. No. The world defied him. What man built up, the wind and rain tore down. The fields he cleared for his crops and his villages, the jungle fought to reclaim. The seeds he sowed, the birds snatched away. The shoots he nurtured, the insects nibbled. The harvest he stored, the mice plundered. The animals he bred and fed, the wolves and foxes stole away. The mountains, the rivers, and the oceans stood in their places and would not make way for him. The earthquake, the flood, the hurricane, the blizzard, and the drought would not disappear at his command. True, the world would not meekly submit to man's rule, so he had to do what to it? What do you mean? If the king comes to a city that will not submit to his rule, what does he have to do? He has to conquer it. Of course. In order to make himself the ruler of the world, men first had to conquer it. Good Lord, I said, and nearly leaped out of my chair while striking my brow and all the rest. Yes. You hear this 50 times a day. You can turn on the radio or the television and hear it every hour. Man is conquering the deserts. Man is conquering the oceans. Man is conquering the atom. Man is conquering the elements. Man is conquering outer space. Ishmael smiled. You didn't believe me when I said this story, it's ambient in your culture. Now you see what I mean. The mythology of your culture hums in your ears so constantly that no one pays the slightest bit of attention to it. Of course man is conquering space and the atom and the deserts and the oceans and the elements. According to your mythology, this is what he was born to do. Yes, that's very clear now. Now, the first two parts of the stories have come together. The world was made for man, and man was made to conquer and rule it. And how does the second part contribute to your explanation of how things came to be this way? Let me think about it. Once again, this is a sort of sneaky way of blaming the gods. They made the world for man, and they made man to conquer and rule it, which he eventually did, and this is how things came to be the way they are. Nail it down. Go a little deeper. I closed my eyes and gave it a couple of minutes, but nothing came. Ishmael nodded towards the windows. All this, all your triumphs and tragedies, all your marvels and miseries, are a direct result of what? I chewed on it for a while, but I still couldn't see what he was getting at. Try it this way, Ishmael said. Things wouldn't be the way they are if the gods had meant man to live like a lion or a wombat, would they? No. Man's destiny was to conquer and rule the world, so things came to be this way as a direct result of man fulfilling his destiny. Of course. He had to fulfill his destiny, didn't he? Yes, absolutely. So what is there to get excited about? Very true, very true. As the takers see it, all this is simply the price of becoming human. How do you mean? It wasn't possible to become fully human living beside dragons in the slime, was it? No. In order to become fully human, man had to pull himself up out of the slime, and all this is the result. As the takers see it, the gods gave man the same choice they gave Achilles: a brief life of glory or a long, uneventful life in obscurity. And the takers choose a brief life of glory. Yes, that's certainly how it's understood. People just shrug and say, well, this is the price that had to be paid for indoor plumbing and central heating and air conditioning and automobiles and all the rest. I gave him a quizzical look. And what are you saying? I'm saying that the price you've paid is not the price of becoming human. It's not even the price of having the things you just mentioned. It's the price of enacting a story that casts mankind as the enemy of the world. End of chapter 4.